guys, I'm Kristen. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. I've got my tea steeping, I'm in my comfy chair, and that means I'm ready to talk about one of the most hyped books from 2021, She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker-Chan. If you are at all connected into the fantasy book world in any way, I feel like you have to have heard at some point of She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker-Chan this past year. I think a ton of people got arcs, and everyone ahead of time talked about how amazing this book was. And honestly, I don't think it was that good. But before I jump into my personal thoughts on the book and really dive into the review, I just want to remind everyone that my reviews are usually designed to help someone decide whether or not this book is going to be enjoyable for them or not going to be the book for them, because I don't think that we're all liking or going to like the same books. If you absolutely love this book and it means something really important to you, especially from a queer identity perspective, that's absolutely valid. I think this book had great content in that regards. So just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that it's not okay that you liked it. I'm sure there are books out there that I absolutely love that you really hate, and that's okay. So getting into the book itself, She Who Became the Sun is a historical fantasy that is very heavy more towards the historical and less so towards the fantasy. There is magic in this book, but it is very light. That is something that I am absolutely okay with though. This book is set in China in, I think around, or at least it starts in around 1345 when China was under Mongol rule. But this is supposed to be a sort of fantastical and queer reimagining of the beginning of the Ming Dynasty. The setup for this is a little girl who is actually never named or identified, is given a destiny of nothing, whereas her brother is given the destiny of greatness, that he is destined to achieve greatness in his life. The family is living in extreme poverty at this time. There is a significant drought, and I would actually say that this is one of the more environmental, like very atmospheric moments of the book, because you really feel the extreme poverty and drought and the seriousness of the situation that the little girl is living in at this time with her family. Her brother and father both die, and when her brother dies, she decides that she wants to take that destiny of greatness for herself. And so she steals her brother's identity. And then the setting here at large is this China under Mongol rule, and we do have more perspectives than just our main character Chu. We also have perspectives from people on her side of, so the native population of this country, but also some perspectives from the Mongols as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the plot and pacing to start off with. I think that the pacing was really rather slow. The beginning of the book and the initial setup was quite interesting, but I felt like it really slogged through the middle of the book. Mainly, I think this is because there was a really weird weight of what scenes we were and weren't privy to, and particularly action scenes. It felt like whenever anything actually really dramatic was happening from an action perspective, that we were not privy to that information, or that it was summarized in like a single line or paragraph and not any description was given. Part of me wonders, based on some of the comments that I've seen from the author Shelley Parker-Chan, is that they were trying to avoid writing like horrific, violent moments, but in the same regards, there is, this is in the synopsis for the book, there is like the monastery that Chu goes to burns down at one point, and it's not talked about at all. It's sort of, that scene cuts off when the person who's making that decision is like, burn it to the ground, and then we do a huge time jump. That's the other thing about the pacing and some of the plot points. There are really strange, disconnected or disjointed time jumps through the book. I don't have a problem with time jumps, but what I would say here is that we aren't really given a lot of information about what happened over the length of that time jump. So for example, from where we leave off when the monastery is burnt down, we do a significant time jump and Chu shows up somewhere else in a different city, and we're given no information about how they got there whatsoever. What happened to them as the monastery was burning down, how they traveled, what happened to them when they were traveling, like how they came to decide to be here. None of that information is given. And this happens a couple times with time jumps throughout the book that are quite significant. I personally don't have a problem with slower paced books, but usually when a book is slower, I like to see a lot more character depth to really fill in the rest of the book. If it's not going to be big in action, I want it to be big in character. And I don't feel like this book was big in character either, although I think that this is going to depend on what type of character reader you are. Relatively, there are very few action sequences and more character moments, and so I think that if you are more of a plot action reader, this is going to come across as a character-based book. However, I felt like the connection with the characters was really, really distant, particularly with the character Chu. I have seen some interpretations that this is because Chu has such a complicated relationship with their own identity. They are so separated from their own identity that then, of course, we also feel distant from that character. The character of Chu, I kind of had a hard time with. As I said, it did feel like those chapters were very distant when we are in Chu's head, and that is something that I'm really looking for, is like a deep connection with characters. But also, I personally have a really hard time with characters who are solely motivated by ambition. And that's Chu's whole thing, is they will do anything that it takes to achieve greatness. Is something that I would say is or was done extremely well in this book, is that each of the perspectives feel distinct from each other. Like the writing changes a little bit, the depth of emotion changes a little bit depending on who we are seeing that moment from. So for example, another large main character here is the character of Wu Yang. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name correctly, so I apologize if I'm not. But this character is someone who is actually like of the native Chinese population, and he is now a eunuch general for the Mongols. And his storyline I actually really liked. And when we are with Wang, he is a much more emotional character, and there's a lot going on from an emotional like depth and turmoil perspective, and you really, really feel that in his chapters, or like in the times that we're from his perspective. I really, really felt his storyline, and I think that there were really significant character moments when it was from his perspective. Those are the two majority perspectives that we see, but we do occasionally get filler scenes from other people as well. I'd love to talk a little bit now about some of the themes that are within this book. Obviously, destiny is a huge one, and this was actually kind of a problem for me. Fate was used a lot to explain away a lot of plot conveniences. There were a lot of things that just happened that made no sense, or that was like, wow, that was extremely convenient that that landslide happened right then. And it was just like, fate. And like, it's not that that couldn't be the case, but it was plot conveniences. They were plot conveniences, and then we used fate and Chu's mission of greatness, or Wang's ultimate destiny of blank, kind of spoilery, were used to explain why that plot convenience happened. And it wasn't anything that either of them did that was so great or strategic, or it was like really great planning, or they were a really great fighter. Like it was nothing. It was just like, this happened because of fate. Outside of this though, I think that the other themes were done quite well. And that is, there are very significant themes involving identity and gender roles. This is a society that does not value women whatsoever. All other male characters in the book are like, well, there's no way that lady's calling the shots. Heaven wouldn't deign for a woman to be successful or smart. So the idea of like that these gender roles existed, and how some of the characters are fighting to go around those gender roles, I think is quite a significant theme here, and it is done well. So while we do get really into gender roles, we also and wanting to find ways outside of existing roles that you're sort of assigned at birth, but also then identity. And obviously Chu has an extremely complicated relationship with their own identity, and we do go on an interesting journey with that, especially like connection with their own physical body. And I think that that's actually something that is probably quite well done here. Although I don't have any personal experience with this, I do know that a lot of people are connecting with more of the queer components in this book, and I think that that's absolutely great. Final note on world building and magic systems. Even though this is a book that is set in a real place and a real time, just with perhaps slightly different terminology used in some cases, I actually couldn't get a really good distinction between the different cultures here, like between the native Chinese population culture and the culture of the Mongols, other than that the Mongols really liked archery and horses. Like those were the things that were used as identifiers between the two cultures, and that was it. Otherwise, it felt like it was something that was important to each side, but I couldn't tell why or what the differences actually were. There was, as I mentioned, that moment at the beginning when we're talking about Chu's childhood and the drought and the poverty that they were experiencing. That was really, really great world building. Like I felt like you could really feel what was happening in that moment and you could get a sense of what was happening within the world. Where we are in the rest of the book, I don't feel like is explained in quite as beautiful and magical and like connected of a way. So you don't feel the setting that they are in for the rest of the book in quite the same way that you did in that first opening sequence. And in regards to magic system, as I said before, this is almost no magic. It's essentially just that when heaven feels that someone is worthy of ruling, you get flames. I think flames or light or something like that. Like that's the magic. It's the only magic that's in this book, and perhaps it will be explored a little bit more based on where things were going in the second book. I think that's all that I really wanted to say about each of the distinct components in the book. So I'm going to get into the section of my reviews that I would call, I guess, like, is this book for you? So we'll start with the positive. This book might be for you if you are really into historical fantasy and don't mind more distant character writing. And also, I think this book might be for you if you are someone who really, really reads for thematic content. Like if you read to explore themes and ideas and everything else is just icing on the cake, but it's about what that book makes you think about and question, then yeah, this book might be for you. Now on the flip side, this book might not be for you if you are a character who really, really likes to do an emotional deep dive with your characters and really feel everything that they are feeling. If that is what you are reading for, this is not the book for you. But also, I think this book is not going to be for you if you are really into action, battle scenes, and military drama. This book was sort of marketed as a military book, and while at one point Chu is in the military and there is military stuff going on, we neither focus on the actual battle sequences and like action that is happening, nor the strategizing. Like it talks about that from a distant perspective, but that's not the focus. It's not a military strategy book. It's not a military action book. They're in the military. Okay, well that was my review for She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker-Chan. As I said, this book just really was a swing and a miss for me. I don't really understand what it is that I am missing that other people absolutely loved about this book, but again, reading is so personal. Have you read this book or were you planning to read this book? If so, let me know down below. I'd love to hear what other people thought of it. Although generally I think people really, really liked it, but I think that there are also a perhaps quieter subset of readers who, like me, just feel like this was not quite the right book for them. That is it for me today, guys. I'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe or comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. See you next time.